228. Let's get to World War Z, which came out in 2013. Is directed by Mark Forster, stars Brad Pitt, Muriel Enos, Daniela Curtez, James Badge Dale. And the synopsis is former United Nations employee Jerry Lane traverses the world in a race against time to stop a zombie pandemic that is toppling armies and governments and threatens to destroy humanity itself. So this movie was a huge deal when it came out. I know that David Fincher was originally on board to direct this, or at least at a certain point. It is based off very loosely off of the book titled World War Z. I've never read the book. I knew of it going into the movie, but I knew that it was not really a direct adaptation. There are a lot of things that really got me excited. For one, I love zombie films. I like blockbuster zombie films, and it's very rare we get that nowadays. It's mainly TV shows like The Walking Dead or very indie films done by like A24 or other studios like that. Mark Forster, before I really get into the movie itself, Mark Forster, not a huge fan. I think not to be too mean here, I think he's a fairly bland, disappointing director more often than not. Like he did Quantum of Solace, which is by far my least favorite Daniel Craig James Bond film. He just seems to have, like, he has potential with the stories, with the films that he gets, and yet he never really seems to do enough with them. He doesn't have the grace to make them epic enough or emotional enough or deep enough. They're just in this very middle of the road average ground. And for the most part, that's happened time after time. It's not just a one-off deal. So whenever I see his name on a list or he's announced to be directing something else, I'm not like, oh boy, I can't wait to see that. It's mainly, I'll get around to that eventually. Anyways, for the movie itself, I think that overall it is a solid action apocalypse blockbuster. But along with the Mark Forster isms of underwhelming certain things, this movie could be amazing, and I would have loved to have seen David Fincher direct this. It could have been incredible. This was also around the time Brad Pitt was not really having a renaissance, but I feel like he was getting into more big blockbuster projects that still had a good character piece for him. He was also a producer on his company. The initial setup for everything, when they're just driving in New York City and then suddenly things go haywire, I think that's very effective, and it's just complete chaos. They race into this apartment building, I think, and things just go from there. What does hurt the movie, which I feel like this is a popular opinion, it's PG-13. There is an unrated version, but does nothing really. The PG-13 rating does make it feel fairly safe at times when it comes to the gore, when it comes to the look of the zombies even, because sadly nowadays everything is going to be compared to the makeup of The Walking Dead. I would say, at least that's what I do. And the makeup, the special effects, there's nothing really flawed in terms of bad effects, but the zombies look very uninteresting. They're mainly just pale. There's no real horror imagery to them. There's a few like grotesque faces and teeth and all that, but there's very little to be shocked by or be wowed by creatively. It's just a big horde of zombies racing at you that offer very little else in terms of entertainment. which is not a huge deal. It's not a deal breaker, but I just always wish that they were a little bit more interesting visually. This movie was marketed beyond belief, and every single cool shot in the movie, with one of the more iconic ones being the mountain of zombies piling on top of each other in Israel, climbing up to the helicopter. I saw that image so many times. All the stuff in Israel, the stuff in the city. Like, I feel like by the time I got to this movie, it is one of the worst cases of nothing is new, nothing is surprising. In some ways, it makes it predictable. While I don't fault them inherently for marketing it, it's a huge movie and it didn't even do that well, all considering. It's still, as a audience member, it was disappointing. But I always remember that every time I watch it. And I've seen it maybe a half a dozen times over the years. I always remember that brutal marketing campaign. Casting wise, besides Brad Pitt, it's solid. I really like Muriel Enos. She was in The Killing, and she's done a lot of really interesting character work. Very underrated actor. James Badge Dale pops up for a little bit, not for much. I like him most of the time. He's not amazing in everything, but I think he's at least entertaining. Some standout scenes that I haven't already mentioned. The moment at the apartment building on the roof when Brad Pitt thinks I think he's been bitten, or he gets blood in his mouth or something, and he knows that the time limit of a human turning into a zombie is X amount of time, so he gets on the edge of the roof hoping to save his family just in case he turns, and he's counting to himself, and if he turns, he's falling off the roof. But then thankfully he doesn't, and he's good to go. Also in Israel, the stampede sequence after the avalanche of zombies get into the encampment. The effects are solid in that, and just the visual of seeing this horde race at massive speed through the streets, and then you see that girl or boy, whoever it is, standing there and seems like they're immune, and all the zombies are running around them. The airplane crash when a zombie is on board, and then the airplane door blows off and people get sucked out and it crashes. Plus the quiet getaway with James Badge Dale at that military base. The most disappointing part of the movie having to play it safe and be a little too vanilla for the genre is the ending. And I know that the ending, I won't go into too much detail, but the ending was vastly different in the original cut. It was much bigger, much more grand, but I think from what I read, the budget was just skyrocketing and it was a mess and it just was not going to work for whatever reason. So they changed it to this very, very small scale ending. I think it's not horribly done. Like, I understand you got to do what you got to do, but the ending, it's called World War Z. And sure, there's the international travel of Brad Pitt and the different countries and all these different situations, but with a movie with that title, you expect the ending to be insane, to be huge, and it is the furthest thing from that. It's just Brad Pitt tiptoeing through this medical facility to get this vaccine or whatever it is, trying to not make noise, occasionally startling a zombie, and then there's the very, I hate to say it, very goofy interaction with the scientist who's locked behind the glass door, and he pushes his face up close and is making that chattering sound with his teeth. every time I get there, I'm like, oh man, I forgot how lame this third act is and how it just goes nowhere. And then there is that final little epilogue. That's kind of the ending I wish I had seen. Maybe that was part of what they were originally shooting. I don't know. But that epilogue is what I wish could have been expanded upon. And then the Brad Pitt tiptoeing sequence was condensed. Besides that, I don't know if there's a whole lot else to say. I would recommend it. I feel like it's one that a lot of people bring up when favorite zombie movies are covered. My guess would be that's mainly because it's so broad and commercial and accessible, which, hey, that's an accomplishment on its own. I wish they had made a sequel in whatever way. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. It might. I heard talks about it, but I feel like with the budget and the success that it did not have. So that one is a light 4 out of 5.